Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Film Room Podcast. This is Season 2, Episode 32. I'm your host, Joe Baress. We are not joined by Joby today, but we are joined by my friend Scott Walsh. He's my co-host for the day. Scotty, how was your Easter? How we doing today?
Good. Hope everyone had a good Easter. I hope, Joe, did the Easter Bunny bring you all sorts of jelly beans and chocolate and everything like that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, my
Good.
God. I got so much. Smidgens, Whoppers, Swedish fish. I mean, I'm spoiled. You know me.
Oh, yeah, I know.
So yeah, we might as well kick off the show as we always do. We are joined by our Times-Tribune Athlete of the Week, Adrianna Condrad from Abington Heights softball. Adrianna, how we doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thanks so much for joining us. Just to let everyone know what Adrianna did last week on Tuesday. Now, we're recording this on a Monday afternoon. So last Tuesday, she pitched a 3-hit shutout with 10 strikeouts and 2 walks and went 2 for 4 with 2 RBIs in a 6-0 win over defending state 4A champion Valley View. And a day later, she went 2 for 4 with 2 RBIs and again was the winning pitcher, striking out 8, walking 6, allowing 4 hits and 2 runs in 4 1/3 innings in a 10-3 win over Holy Cross. And Adrianna, obviously, those are 2 big wins over 2 very, very talented teams. Let's start with just individually. How do you feel you've started this season individually?
I definitely think I couldn't ask for a better start. I mean, we also played a lot of preseason games. We're still undefeated, and I think honestly, that's what I was looking for because I know as a team, we have the talent to be really good this year, and I think that's just really showing now on the field.
Yeah, tell me about, expand a little bit on the team aspect. Obviously, it's early, although the spring season flies by. But tell me about how the team has performed so far this season.
I mean, I know I couldn't be any happier with their performance. We lost basically our whole entire infield last year with seniors, so ton of new players playing in positions, and I think everyone's really gaining their confidence in those spots, and you're really starting to see it, especially when we're starting to get in those higher winning games. Everyone is just in it, and especially our team chemistry this year. I genuinely enjoy being with these girls on this field, and I feel like everyone feels the same, so it's really helping motivate us this season.
Oh, certainly. And obviously, you're talking about a Valley View team. You're talking about a Holy Cross team. Excellent lineups. And it really seems like every year there's a ton of great teams. So what do you think of the softball in the area? I mean, it's just really, really good.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think we have one of the best leagues in NEPA. With our teams, we have Valley View, North Pocono, Holy Cross, Abington. You have all these big power teams who are making it district championship every year, or especially Valley View. They won 4A state championship last year. So I feel like it shows that there's a ton of great competitors in our area overall, for our softball league.
Adrianna, you talked about, obviously, the great teams in the area and everything. Just talk a little bit about, your approach facing Valley View and Holy Cross in those 2 games, both offensively and defensively, because you certainly had success against two very good pitchers in Valley View's Abby Call and Holy Cross's Ava Schmidt, and obviously you were able to contain, shut down 2 very, very powerful lineups.
I definitely knew going in that both pitchers were obviously great pitchers, but I also knew defensively our team has been working all week on hitting speed specifically for Abby and Ava, knowing that they're one of the harder throwing velo teams in our area. So we really honed in on that, and I think we were just able to make some timely hitting this week. Specifically, we were just hitting, it would be a single after a single, and we'd score a run or something like that, and I think that really helped us. And then more so offensively in the field, I don't know if you would call this cheating, but I definitely did chart some of the games against home hitters, so I kind of had a good idea of where I should be throwing pitches or where sequences were and where balls were being placed.
Oh, it's
That's
really
not called cheating. That's called preparation. That's
exactly.
great.
That's fantastic. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. That kind of leads into my next question. I don't really know if you're probably trying to play softball year round, but is there anything you worked on specifically in the off season? How did you prepare for this softball season?
So actually in November, I ended up tearing my MPFL and was out basically up until January. So I was kind of just on like a recovery season. And I think my main goal was really just to be back on the field and try to perform the best of my ability. And my goal was to come back stronger than I left. And I definitely think I'm starting to make that mark.
Absolutely. If you don't mind, like just expanding on the injury and what did it take to get back from that?
I definitely think it was really hard. I committed maybe the month or two before to Syracuse, so it was definitely like kind of heartbreaking telling my coaches that, hey, I'm already like out, I'm injured. And I definitely think that helped motivate me a lot. I have great physical therapists in the area. She worked with me a lot throughout my injury, and she had the confidence in me to get back. And I think that really just pushed me and motivated me to know that I will be back on the field.
Absolutely. So last year, obviously, I mean, we were talking about, the great teams in the area. You had beaten North Pocono twice last year, I believe, and lost in the district final. Is there anything that you learned either individually or as a team from last season?
I definitely think as a team, we really learned that we need to keep our team chemistry together and we can't go into any game thinking that we're more than or less than because obviously I think last time we played North Pocono it was like a 7-1 game, 7-3 game,
Yeah,
something along the lines of that. Like we blew them out. But then obviously in the district championship they wanted to beat us and that's what happened. So I think we really changed our mindset and we stopped thinking games and certain outcomes are going to come out the certain way that we think they're going to be, and more so that we have to determine that outcome by how we play.
absolutely. Obviously, it seems like you're kind of stepping into maybe the role that Lauren Stalika has had. I mean, she was obviously a great pitcher for this area. Is there anything you learned from Lauren, in your years with her?
Oh, definitely. I've played first base with her the past 2 years, and when I would get a little bit of time on the mound, she would switch to first base, and she would be behind me, and she kinda taught me that, like, that's the kind of the role I wanna be in. I wanna be a leader who also wants their teammates to do their best, even if they are not on the mound right now, or vice versa in the batting cage. She was always the most talkative person and always uplifting others.
Yeah. So yeah, tell me a little bit about that as well. You're a junior now, and it really seems like you're probably stepping into that leadership role. What is your role with the team this year, and do you enjoy it?
I mean, I definitely think my role is to be a little bit more of a leader, specifically in the infield. I honestly enjoy it. I think having that leadership role really strives me to want to do better for my team. And it also makes me feel more confident in what I'm doing, knowing that I also have a team behind me who backs me up as well.
I want to, Adrian, I want to ask you something about that, but as far as leadership, but off the field, I found something interesting yesterday when we talked for the article for the Athlete of the Week for the paper. You said that one of the athletes you admire was former University of Oklahoma player Jocelyn Alou, and you said one of the reasons you admire her is how she gives back to her community. And what struck me was when I reached out to you about doing the interview, you apologized for not getting back to me right away because you said you were helping out at your church on Easter Sunday. And I just was curious as to what you were doing, and is that something you do a lot of maybe community service or things off the field that show your leadership qualities.
Yeah, definitely. Yesterday I was helping out at my church. We do an Easter egg hunt. So the week before we were filling, I think it was around 1,000 eggs full of candy for all the younger children at the church. And then yesterday I was at mass, and then after mass I helped set out all the eggs for the kids to find and then helped clean up. So that's why I couldn't get back in time. But I definitely think I love my role in like youth group and helping out. But also off the field, I also help a ton with our softball clinics at the school for travel. Especially we do like blessing bags where we give back to like the women's shelter and stuff like that. And I feel like it really makes me feel more fulfilled as a person outside of softball, that I could also help my community in other ways.
Adrianna,
That's great.
awesome.
Great.
Yeah, good for you. That's awesome. So this week, it looks like you guys have 4 games this week. We always kind of talk about it. The spring sports season is very, very challenging in the fact that it's kind of a sprint, and you're trying to fight the elements on the weather day in and day out, trying to fit in probably practice, fit in games when you can. What's it kind of like, trying to navigate this spring sports season?
Definitely with a little bit of the colder weather and having to move practices indoor, outdoor. We train somewhere like 10 minutes away from us if we have to get moved inside. So it's kind of like mentally preparing that you could be indoors or outdoors, but you still need to put the work in on top of balancing schoolwork and stuff. I really utilize like being in school and asking my teachers, especially when we're leaving for away games and stuff like that. And that's really been helping me this season, stay on top of my schoolwork when weather's kind of uncertain right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Adrianna, take us back. How did you get started in softball, and what did you like about it? What made it click with you?
I played a ton of sports when I was younger, and softball just ended up being one. And I definitely think what made me stick with it was actually that not a lot of people believed I would be really good in our area. I mainly got cut for most of our like all-star leagues in the area when I was really young. And I think that just motivated me to stick with it more, because I was like, I could definitely do this, and I don't want someone to tell me that I couldn't.
Absolutely.
Adrianna, you told me yesterday you played travel ball during the summer for a team in Virginia, and you kind of traveled all over the country and everything like that. How does that work? Did you like live down there with some teammate or something, or did you meet up with the team at destinations, and maybe where were some of the places that you got to play during the summer?
So starting with like how I found the team, I actually was entered in, it's kind of like perfect game for baseball. It's called Select 30 for softball. So I was in Florida with that, and I got paired up with this catcher who's now my travel catcher, but we just honestly had a great bond. My travel team at the time was starting to fall apart, and I was looking for somewhere to go, and she was like, "Why not come to our team? We need another pitcher, and I think you'd be a great fit." So that's kind of how I got locked in with the organization, and they've treated me nothing but better. I play with 16 other D1 commits and a few other girls who are probably going to end up being committed soon. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So, interestingly enough, the one thing that sort of stuck out about your Athlete of the Week interview that you did with Scott yesterday, it's a really good interview. So if people listening, they want to expand on more interview questions, be sure to pick up a paper tomorrow, and it'll also be online on Tuesday as well. But you are apparently a huge Miami Dolphins fan. How did that happen?
It's just kind of family tradition. My mom really loves the Dolphins, so I kind of got sucked in. Even if we don't win a lot, it's still really fun to watch them.
Yeah. What do you think about this offseason? I'm a Packer fan, so I really like Malik Willis. So you did, you got our defensive coordinator, you got our backup quarterback, but you seemed to trade away everyone else. What do you think? What do you think of the Dolphins offseason?
I'm hoping we come back stronger this year with like some of the trades and stuff, because we definitely lost a lot, but also we gained a ton of new players, and I'm hoping everyone just kind of gels together and we could pull out a few more wins this season.
Scotty, how do you feel as a Jets fan that
Well, I know she's going to at least get 2 wins this season.
Yeah. Exactly. Adrianna, the last thing from me, you already talked to Scott about it in your Athlete of the Week interview, but and you mentioned it earlier. I think it's great. You committed to Syracuse University. Tell us what made you settle on Syracuse.
Definitely when you're traveling over the summer for me, my travel organization, like hopefully or gratefully, they like set me up with a list of coaches that were interested in me from the summer, and they're like, hey, look at X, Y, and Z school. They like you, why not? So kind of over the summer, I started going to all those schools for camps and stuff like that. And Syracuse honestly just stuck out to me. I stepped on campus. I went through the camp. I loved the coaches. I loved how the team worked together. Obviously took my time around campus, found a ton of good food places and other things, academics too. But I just honestly knew that's where I wanted to be after going through a few schools. And when September 1st hit, I just kind of knew like that was where my home was going to be.
Absolutely. Go to Dinosaur and get some barbecue for sure.
Oh, I've been there. It's so good.
It's so good, right? So good. Scotty recommended
Is there
that
anybody
to me
who
when I
is
went
there
out.
anybody is there anybody who hasn't been to the Dinosaur? That's
That's true.
Other question.
That's true.
yeah.
Scott,
I love
anything
the
else?
fact. Yeah, like just on the Syracuse, I asked, obviously, Scranton's favorite son, Jerry McNamara, is going up there, and the thing I loved is Adrianna told me, Joe, that she wears number 3 like Jerry did.
Oh, how about that?
It's awesome. I think that connection is awesome. So
That's awesome. That is great. So, all right, I think that's all we've got. Adrianna, I really appreciate you joining us. It was fun talking to you and really cool with all the work you do off the field. It's, arguably more important than, playing softball. So that's great to hear. Keep up the great work on and off the field, and good luck the rest of the season.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. All right. That was Adrianna Condrad, our Times-Tribune Athlete of the Week of Abington Heights softball. Scotty, what a great interview. I'm glad you asked that. I'm glad you asked about off the field. It's great to see. It's great to see the kids get involved in the community.
yeah, it didn't kind of dawn on me until I was writing up the interview afterwards, when she mentioned about, the athlete that she admires, and the community work that she does. And then, like I said, that's when it hit me. It was like, oh, wait a minute. You just, she was apologizing for, because she was doing stuff, for the church, as she explained and everything. And I just found that very, taking an athlete that she admires and, mimicking what, in her own community, what she did. So I wanted to, ask her that, hopefully not embarrass her or anything. Cause, like I said, I think it's great that she, she does that. She did that stuff. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And, getting back to on the field, obviously, this week really stuck out for her and for Abington. I mean, beating Valley View and beating Holy Cross back-to-back days, back-to-back games, that you're especially getting a 3-hit shutout against that lineup at Valley View. This is kind of a very, the athletes of the week are always great, but this was quite a performance against 2 very, very good teams.
Yeah, and especially to the fact, Abington lost some very talented players.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about Lawrence Delika, but they lost several other players too to graduation. So, this was, they did have players like Adrianna coming back. So, the cupboard wasn't totally bare, but, I would, obviously Valley View, defending state champion, a lot of players back from that team. Holy Cross, a team that went, to the state quarterfinals last year and pretty much has, a good nucleus. I think they only lost like one starter from last year's team, back. So to face 2 top teams like that right back to back, and to and to come away with victories, great performance by Adrianna and the rest of the Lady Comets, and she also talked about how now this is going to give them confidence, moving forward, especially some of those younger players that stepped into those roles, make them believe that, hey, we're not a bad team, we're pretty good, we're pretty good as well and everything. So 2 huge wins for them last week.
Absolutely. And just to get into a few other great performances from last week that we were weighing for Athlete of the Week, Gavin Aprishko of Valley View Track and Field won the 200-meter dash in a time of 21.54 seconds to set a school record in an 80-70 win over Scranton. In the Lackawanna Track Conference Division I boys track and field meet. His time is the fastest in conference history, surpassing North Pocono's Colin Kravitz, who ran 21.57 seconds in 2023. He also won the 100. Also in track, Weston Yanoni of Dunmore Track and Field set a school record in the 110-meter hurdles with a time of 14.44 seconds. That broke the record of 14.84 seconds set by Mike Colcharno in 2013. He also teamed with his fellow 400 relay teammates to set a record in that event in a win over Mountain View. And he also scored 17 team points by winning the 110 hurdles, 100 and 300 hurdles, and running on the winning 400 relay team in a win over Riverside. Also in baseball, Nick Bohenik of Riverside. On Thursday, he pitched 6 2/3 innings of no-hit ball with 11 strikeouts and 3 walks and went 2 for 3 with 2 runs in Riverside's 6-0 win over Abington Heights. And on last Monday, he went 1 for 4 with 2 RBIs on a run in a 16-0 4-inning victory over Holy Cross. So those were a few of the great performances from last week. So, Scotty, let's talk about it here. Maybe we could start with softball, just because we were talking to a softball player. I know you've been busy, Scotty. Let's is there anything that has stuck out so far in this softball season? It's also been, like we mentioned, it's spring, so they're trying to navigate when to play games against, crazy weather, rain, temperature drops, all that stuff. But so far early in this softball season, is there anything that's kind of stuck out to you?
No, it's usually, it's pretty much the teams you would expect have gotten off to, to good starts. We've obviously touched upon Abington Heights and their 3-0 start. Even though Valley View lost that game to Abington Heights, they're off to a 4-1 start. So obviously they're a very good team. North Pocono, which was district champion last year in Class 5A, they're off to a 4-2 start. So, those teams are going to be good in Division 1. Wallenpaupack and West Scranton are playing well, too, in Division 1. So they've gotten off to good starts as well. Wallenpaupack's 3-1 and West Scranton is 4-1. Division 2 is going to be tough. We've talked about Holy Cross. The loss to Abington was their lone loss. They're off to a 4-1 start. Mid Valley's off to a 6-1 start. And they're obviously in the same division. They play each other, and another team that's going to be I think in the mix there too is Old Fords. They lost their league opener to Mid Valley, but they're scheduled to play Holy Cross this week, so that's going to be an interesting matchup in Division 2. And Division 3, they're the ones that have, I think, been affected the most by the weather.
Yeah.
A lot of those teams have only played one game or 2 games, so it's been tough to get a little bit of a gauge on how that's going to shake out. I think in that division, I think Montrose is going to be a good team. Elk Lake always has a good team. A team, the Lackawanna Trail it'll be decent. Maybe even Carbondale area will be and Blue Ridge will be other teams that could possibly contend there as well. So it is still early, and it is so tough with as you said with the weather. But so far things have kind of gotten off to maybe a bit of an expected start in the in softball. No real surprises.
Absolutely. And Scotty, you were able to get out to a baseball game last week. I guess at this point it was a week ago.
Yeah.
And you're going to be getting out to a game tonight, but maybe tell us a little bit about that game that you covered. It was obviously a great performance from Mason Stetz.
Yeah, it was the Dunmore Mid Valley game last Monday at Shout Stadium, and matchup of two Division II contenders this season, but also two teams that won district championships last year. Dunmore won in 3A and Mid Valley won in 4A, and Mason Stetz from Dunmore threw a great game, complete game 4-hitter, shut down a pretty powerful Mid Valley lineup. Anytime they did mount any kind of a threat, he was able to come through and make the pitch to get out of trouble or get out of a jam. Won that game 3-0. So it was a great great performance by him. But that division is going to be is really going to be a race, because you've got Mid Valley, which won the division championship last year. You have Dunmore, which is a contender. You've got Riverside, which is off to a 5-0 start. You mentioned Nickel Hennick's performance. That game against Abington Heights, he hit his 100 pitch mark at 6 2/3 innings and had to come out, and Cooper Borowski came in and finished off the no-hitter. To no-hit a good hitting team like Abington Heights is a pretty darn good performance. So they're going to be in the mix. Surprise team, and I'm hopefully going to get a chance to see them later on today. Again, this being Monday, Lakeland is off to a 4-0 start. They've got a young team that seems to start gel and everything. They're playing Dunmore, so I'll get to see them against I'll get to see the Bucks for a second time, but I'll get to see them play and see how some of their young kids perform as well. So that Division II race is going to be is really going to be interesting this year in the Lackawanna League.
Absolutely. Yeah, Scott, if I ever let you off this podcast, I
first pitch is in 2.5 hours. So let's keep that in mind.
Let's get moving.
So, yeah, and I do have to drive to Dunmore.
Right.
So I can't wait until 4:29 and walk in my backyard and watch them play or anything like that. So
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, that's you're right. That's going to be a hell of a race there in Division II. Scotty, is there anything else, either anything else coming up this week that's kind of interesting in baseball, or anything that's stuck out so far in this season for you?
No, again, I think, obviously I mentioned Division II. Division I is going to be, obviously, Abington Heights, was the favorite going in. They're off to a little bit of a slow start at 1-1 in the division. North Pocono and Scranton are both 2-0 in Division I so far. Delaware Valley and Paw Pack are also 1-1. So is West Scranton. So I think Division II is going to be interesting, and Division III's got some pretty good teams this year. Elk Lake, excuse me, is the defending champ. They've got a lot of players back. They're going to be good. Montrose and Lackawanna Trail, though, are off to 2-0 starts, so they're certainly going to be contenders in that in Division III as well. So it's tough. As we mentioned this, or as you mentioned, the spring season. It comes and goes. It's like before it'll be the end of May, and we're into districts already. So these races are gonna kind of be fast and furious here and everything. It's the teams are going to have opportunities. They need to make the most of the opportunities as quick as possible, because before it'll be towards the end of the season, and it might be too late to make a move in the division. So like I said, it's hopefully the weather will cooperate as we get a little more into April, and start maybe getting a little warmer, and we'll get to see some pretty good baseballs.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, I'm sure districts will feel like it's going to start next week.
Yeah.
So Scotty, we have, while I have you here, Scotty, we've got, obviously you were at RailRiders Media Day, and the home opener is tomorrow, and you will also be there covering their home opener. They're playing Durham. So, Scotty, take us a little bit into the RailRiders here. Obviously, their season has already begun, but what have you What's to look forward to with the RailRiders here?
I think there's a lot to look forward to this season. They're off to a pretty good start. They went 6-3 in their first two series on the road against Buffalo and Rochester. They've won 4 straight. Coming home into that home opener, so they're 6-3, and they've got a pretty potent, powerful lineup with some prospects like Spencer Jones and Jason Dominguez. They've got some veteran players like Oswaldo Cabrera. And they've got a pretty good pitching staff with a couple of the top prospects in the Yankee system, Carlos Legrand, Elmer Rodriguez, and Brendan Beck. Harrison Cohen is I think ranked number 28 or 29 out of their top 30 prospects coming out of the bullpen. They've got a really strong bullpen, and they've mixed in some other veteran players, guys like Paul DeYoung, Max Schumann, guys who have major league experience that are on the roster. So I think it's actually a pretty good, a pretty exciting, outlook for the RailRiders, this season. The other prospect you've got too is a couple of things, like really looking forward down the road. There are going to be some Yankees who are currently, sidelined, rehabbing injuries that, could be down here. When Garrett Cole is coming back, we might see Garrett Cole here.
Yeah.
We might see Anthony Volpe here. When he comes back from his injury, Carlos Rodon. So I think there's going to it is a lot of excitement on the field. This season with the RailRiders and the potential for to maybe see some of the Yankees that are rehabbing on their way back to back to the Bronx. And in mid-season too. If he keeps tearing it up at AA, we could see their top prospect, George Lombard Jr., promoted to AAA. So I think a lot, if you're a Yankees fan or a baseball fan in general, I think there's a potential for a lot of excitement this year with the RailRiders.
Absolutely. What's going to be the package for Paul Skeens, Scotty? My friend wants to know.
Clearly, I think Dominguez and or Jones,
right?
Maybe one of the pitchers, would have to be involved in that. I don't know if the Pirates would ask for Lombard,
right?
Because
right.
they brought up that Connor Griffin, and everything. So I don't know if they necessarily need a shortstop.
Right.
But I mean, I guess if you're going to give up Skeens, you ask for him and you find a place to put him in or something.
Right.
You make him a third baseman, you make him a second baseman.
Yeah.
Or something, But,
yeah.
Yeah. So, I think, clearly, it remains to be seen, if some of these prospects will be here later on in the season, come the trade deadline and everything. But they're here now, and get out to PNC Field, enjoy them while they're here. And that's what manager Shelley Duncan said too. He said, things could change. It could be a completely different roster in 2 weeks. It's the way minor league baseball is. He says, but we just enjoy them while they're here, take advantage of it while we're here, and and just kind of wait and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. That's ultimately my point. So I'm glad you said it. You never know what's what the roster is going to be at any point, but at this moment right now, there's a lot of great players. It should be really fun. It should be a really fun season. It usually is, but right now you got a lot of talent here, and so get out to the ballpark. Even my old buddy Paul DeYoung, as you said, former St. Louis Cardinal, but yeah, get to the park. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Scotty, have you checked the weather yet for tomorrow?
Yeah, I think there's supposed to be like snow showers or something like that.
No,
I at least that was something I saw last week, that Tuesday had the potential for. I think, of course, it's going to be cold. I think it's going to, I think it's only going to be in like the mid 40s or something, and first pitch might be around like the upper 30s and everything. So, again, that's, we talk about the high school sports playing in this weather. Unfortunately, the RailRiders have to kind of start their season in this weather as well. And, last year their home opener got frozen out because the field was frozen.
Yeah.
It just was, there was a layer of ice on top of the field. So, hopefully the weather will turn, quickly enough that we can, enjoy some milder weather and get out to the ballpark.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Wanted to mention quickly, obviously we don't have Joby here to talk about it, but his boys basketball all-region team was released on Sunday. Obviously, Player of the Year, Riverside's Nico Antonacci, already has scholarship offers from Syracuse, Penn State, Marquette, and Manhattan. Kind of a no-brainer there. But there were, obviously, we had talked about just some great basketball players this season, and others to make the team. Jordan Schaefer of Abington Heights, Cameron Parker of Old Forge, and also Logan Fanning of Old Forge, two of the players on that team that made a hell of a run to the state final, and Coach of the Year J.J. Thomas as well. Also had Nico's teammate Braden Rose of Riverside make the all-region team. Also Scranton Prep's Packy Doherty, Delaware Valley's Trey Newton, and Dunmore's Braden Canavan, who the nation knows who he is, as he was the top play on SportsCenter's top plays during the season with his buzzer beater. But yeah, congratulations to those players. They were all super deserving, and it was just it really was a hell of a basketball season. And yeah, I'm obviously, Scotty, I'm rolling out my coaches all-stars in wrestling, Division 1, Division 2, Division 3. Division 1 has been released. I believe Division 2 is supposed to come out tomorrow. I have them, and just haven't checked the pages yet, Scotty. But but yeah, I believe the Lackawanna League Division 2 all-stars are coming, and the Division 3 will follow, and I still have my wrestling all-region team, and I'm sure that I'll have all that done by June. So yeah, we'll keep pushing forward here. I'll try to get it before the spring season ends.
As long as it gets done before the start of next season.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah. So, and just, along those lines too, I know the question people are, they see the boys all region team, and you real quick again, great, another great exciting season of boys basketball around here. Old Forge reaching the state final, Riverside, advancing, as far as it did in the state playoffs with an exciting player like Nico. Got to see them play on several occasions this year. Scranton Prep had a great season. Dunmore. Again, it was a real exciting season in boys basketball. But I know the question is, okay, the boys are run. When is the girls all region coming out? So anticipate sometime this week, maybe even on Sunday. The girls, the girls all region basketball team will, is. We didn't forget about them. It's coming out and everything. So you got something to look forward to there. And also I'm excited tomorrow too, Joe, to see the sports writers, Pennsylvania sports writers all-state girls team is going to be announced tomorrow.
Right.
So I know I nominated some of our standout girls for that, and I'm really hoping to see to see that some of our players get recognized and get named to all state teams in their respective classes. So that's coming up tomorrow too.
Yeah, so follow along all week. We will have a lot of that, a lot of good girls basketball postseason awards stuff. You can get it online, you can get it in the paper. However you consume your news these days, we've got you covered. So, kind of winding down here, Scotty, we all right, I'll take you. Where do you want to go, Scotty? Do you want to talk a little bit about our Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins, or you want to talk about a little bit of the Lady Royals? You were down there in Virginia. Obviously, we're a couple weeks removed, but you were down there, and it was such a big moment for this area. So take us where you want to go.
Well, since we were talking about basketball, maybe we could just touch upon the Lady Royals, real quick. Again, phenomenal season. Unfortunately, didn't end the way the way they had hoped it did, but still, national runner-up, 32-1. Beating NYU in the semifinals, at the Final Four. And it's kind of funny. They garnered, Scranton garnered national attention earlier in the season for beating Pitt in women's basketball. It was the first time. It was the first time a Division III team beat a Power Five school in Division III women's basketball. So, there was a lot of attention drawn to the Lady Royals then. And then they, garnered some more national attention by ending NYU's 91 game winning streak, which was at the time was the second longest streak in NCAA basketball history, men's or women's. Only UConn's streak of, I think it was 114 was what was longer and everything. So, so it was a great season for the Lady Royals. The championship game obviously was tough. My biggest fear all season, and we talked about this a number of times, was I was concerned if they went up against a team that had some size inside, and that's what Denison University, the team they faced in the final, did. They had size, and the Lady Royals tried to shoot from the outside, and they just had a bad shooting night, especially in that second quarter. They were 0 for 17 and scored 1 point in the second quarter, and it was like, this was a team that was, averaging, 80 something points a game, and they couldn't buy a basket.
Right.
And, but they came storming back in the third quarter, and they still were leading. They had a 3-point lead, they had a 3-point lead early in the fourth quarter. And again, their offense just went cold. And, part of that was because of Denison's size. They just had a tough time getting the ball inside. And, when they did get it inside, it was, some tough shots and everything. So, so disappointing end, but still a great season for the, for the Lady Royals. So.
Yeah. And Scotty, I just want to say, your coverage was absolutely phenomenal. Great work. It's a lot of work that you put in, not just that week, but, leading up to it, as well as they made their way through the conference playoffs and the rest of the NCAA tournament. So I just want to say you did a fantastic job covering the Lady Royals. But yeah, we all wanted it to, we wanted to end in a national championship, and it didn't happen. But like you said, look at the NCAA tournament now. I mean, you look at ask Gino Auriemma.
Yeah.
I mean, the UConn just and listen, Dawn Staley just had, and that team, just their defensive scheme was incredible. So, but they, UConn just couldn't seem to get any sort of rhythm. Look at that UCLA Texas Final Four game. I mean, Texas's best player just couldn't buy a bucket. And again, that has to do with defense. Look at the national championship game yesterday. UCLA just dominates South Carolina. It's, it just, obviously the defense ramps up. You throw something at a team that they haven't seen, or, you just can't make a shot. You have an off night on the wrong night. And it just, it happens, obviously. And, sometimes you have a double-digit lead, and, sometimes you're up 2 with 10 seconds left, and you try to throw a ball down court, and UConn intercepts it and hits a 40-footer to break your heart. But I digress. I'm still not over it, Scotty. I'm still not over it.
It's going to take you a while, I think, to get over that one. Yeah.
Exactly.
But to your point, though, I mean, that's the beauty of the tournament. Like if teams were to play a best of 7 series, a best of 5 series, like again, I'd like to think, Scranton, and it would win a best of 7 series or a best of 5 series against Denison, but on that one night, it just, like I said, it was a bad night. Same thing, in the NCAA tournament. If UConn and South Carolina women played a best of 7 series,
Right.
UConn probably would have, might emerge victorious.
Right.
But on that one night, South Carolina was the better team, and you don't want to take anything away from anybody and anything, for that, because they, same thing, like going back to the Lady Royals. I don't want to take anything away from Denison. They were a very good team. They certainly were a worthy champion, and deserved to win that game, but like I said, that's just the beauty of tournament play. Any team can beat anybody on a given night, and we've seen it over and over again every year. That's why it's called March Madness. It's
right.
It's just, it happens over and over and over again, and it's why we enjoy watching it.
Absolutely. And Scotty, I don't know how in depth you want to get about this, but I know you love hockey. They're my Penguins farm team, and they're here. But you definitely know more about the team than I do, interestingly enough. But the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins have already clinched a playoff berth. They seem to be rolling right now. I forget. I don't know if it's 5-6 game winning streak.
Six in a row.
Yeah, 6 games. But yeah, tell us a little bit about this Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins team this year.
Yeah, they're obviously, you mentioned they already clinched the playoff spot, and I believe they are 4 points away from they've got 5 games left in the regular season, and I think they're 4 points away from clinching second place. They're not going to catch Providence for first place in the division, but if they clinch second place, that will get them a first round bye.
Mm-hmm.
And which has been key, because the last couple of years they've had to play in that little first round mini series, and they've gotten beat both years by the Phantoms.
Yep.
So having that first round bye, will get them into we'll get them a little rested and ready for whoever they get to face in that in that second round. But they're playing they're playing really well. They've got good scoring, good goaltending. You winning 6 in a row. You hope that they're hitting their stride going into the playoffs. You just hope that they're not peaking too soon.
Right.
Like I said, with that they're that they are that they're building towards something, that this isn't going to be they run it right into the playoffs, having won like 8 of 10, and then they fall flat on their face in the first round, in their first playoff series or something. So it remains to be seen, but they've got 5 games left. 4 of them are at home, actually. So again, if people want to get out to to Mohegan Arena over the next 2 weeks, I know their next game is Thursday. They're at Bridgeport, and that's their final road game. And then I believe they're home on Saturday against I think it's against Cleveland. And that game's actually interesting as well, Joe, because they do a thing where they do an alternative identity kind of thing, where with a community, like a couple of years ago, they were the Old Forge Pizzas, and they played they played as the Pittston Tomatoes one year. Apparently this time around, they're going to be the Scranton Gandy Dancers, which is an ode to the railroad industry here in the area and everything. So that's going to be their alternate identity on Saturday when they play Cleveland at the arena. Yeah. And then they got 3 home games the rest of the following week against, I'm just looking at their schedule now. They play Hershey on the 15th, Bridgeport on the 17th, and Rochester on the 18th. So, still chances to see the Penguins before the playoffs start. And then obviously, playoff hockey is the best, Joe. Playoff hockey is the absolute best. Stanley Cup, Calder Cup. There's just such an excitement and everything like that, and everything. So a chance, hopefully the Penguins can make a little bit of a run and maybe finally bring a Calder Cup championship to this area. That's the one thing that unfortunately this franchise has been lacking. They've been great.
Yep.
Had some great teams over the years. They've been great for the area. Just haven't been able to bring home that championship. Have made the finals on several occasions. Just haven't been able to bring home a championship. Hopefully maybe this year can be the year.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, and you could tell me if I'm wrong, but it's it's tough when your Pittsburgh Penguins have been so successful. So I feel like they've poached kind of players from their roster over these years because of their success. But it's
Yeah,
tough.
but it's also worked the other way too. There have been times where Pittsburgh has
That
then
is
been
true.
eliminated, and they send those players back down.
That is true.
And have made some runs and everything. So it's again, that's the nature of it's the nature of the minor leagues. You're not somebody. I remember somebody saying one time, this was many years ago, when the Red Barons fans were upset when the Red Barons first came here, and the Phillies would take players or trade players or something.
Yeah.
That these teams aren't here to win if they win a championship or have success, great.
Right.
But they're not here for that. They're here to develop players for the parent team.
Right.
And if it means you've got a great team and you lose a player because the parent team is calling him up, it's going to help them up there. Well, then so be it. They're not thinking, well, we'll leave them down there so they can win at Scranton, or they can win at Wilkes-Barre.
Right.
We're going to say, let's get them up here because we need them.
Right.
That's the way it is. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And the Pittsburgh Penguins are playing well, Scotty, much to your Islanders probably not thrilled about that. But
well, what it is too, Joe. My Islanders have actually been struggling and fading down this. Where they need wins. They lost 4 straight. I think not even 8 of 10. They just they fired their coach yesterday, Patrick Waugh.
Yeah.
As a shake. I don't know if there was they just need a different voice, or a desperation move trying to shake some things up. So, they've got, I think, 4 games left in the regular season to try to make the playoffs. And, it's, and of all years too, that the Eastern Conference in the NHL this year, Joe, is stacked. The Islanders have 89 points and they're on the outside looking in,
right.
Of the playoffs, and they've got other teams behind them breathing down their neck. It's just the Eastern Conference just seems to be loaded this year in the NHL. So, yeah, so it's going to be an interesting last couple of weeks, both at the NHL level and the AHL level.
Certainly. And Scotty, tonight, depending on when people are listening to this podcast, it'll either be before the national championship game between Michigan and UConn, or after. I personally, I think that, I guess I'm a little biased here as well, because as people know, I am a Michigan football fan. So I also follow the Michigan basketball team, but as everyone knows, I am a Duke basketball fan first. But anyway, I just think that Michigan is the best team in the country. You've got Axel Lendenberg. He's struggling with an injury that he suffered in the Final Four. We'll see how he comes out and plays, but obviously, who knows? It's one game, like we've been saying. It's one game, and UConn has proven that, they're never going away. So, this is obviously a very well-coached team with Dan Hurley. So thinking Michigan wins tonight, but who knows, Scotty?
Yeah, certainly, I think you're right. I think Michigan might be. I mean, they just dismantle teams.
Yeah.
I think I read something in the preview ahead of time. I think they've scored 90 points in every.
Yeah,
at least 90 points in every tournament game this year, and I think only 2 other times that's happened or something. And I think maybe they're trying to become the first team to score 90 points in every tournament game. It might be only 2 other teams that won every game by double digits or something like that. Whatever it is, it's crazy. It's they just and again, I saw firsthand, as a Gonzaga fan, the way they dismantled Gonzaga earlier in the season. That's just what they seem to do. But again, UConn is UConn, and
right.
And if anybody can figure out a way to maybe beat them, I think it's Dan Hurley and the Huskies. So I'm just looking forward to a great game tonight. It's at this point when I don't have a dog in the fight.
Right.
My bracket was long busted ago. So I just want to see a good game. I just want to see two good teams go at it, and a good exciting game tonight, and provides some entertainment.
Yeah, for sure. As we're putting in box scores and stuff after you.
Yes, as we're typing in Lackawanna League baseball box scores.
That's right. That's right.
Something to keep us entertained during that.
Something to keep us entertained. Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, that I think that about covers it here. We just went over the 1 hour mark. I just want to thank, obviously, our Times-Tribune Athlete of the Week, Adrianna Condrad of Abington Heights Softball, for joining us on top of the show. You can read a little bit more about her in the Athlete of the Week interview that she did with Scotty. That'll be in Tuesday's paper. It'll also be online on Tuesday. Be sure to follow us on X at SportsTT. And probably won't get this up quick enough, but follow Scotty on X as well. We try to retweet his stuff from the sports account as much as possible, but follow S Walsh TT. Scott?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, at S Walsh TT. Be sure to follow him. Follow Joby's Times-Tribune Facebook page. Joby Foss at the Times-Tribune. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, Times-Tribune Sports. And be sure to visit the website, thetimes-tribune.com/sports. And be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you get them: Apple, Spotify. You can listen on YouTube, Amazon Music, and of course Podbean, where we record this show.
Can you listen in airplane mode, Joe?
Can you listen in airplane mode? We love the progressive commercials with Dr. Rick and how to deal with becoming your parents. So that's what that reference is. Go on YouTube. There's a 16-minute fake podcast about it. It's hilarious, but that you may or may not be able to listen to on airplane mode. But Scotty, I saw a new one of those, by the way. Those commercials.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we'll have to watch that one.
Oh, we'll have to keep an eye out for that one, because they just came out with the one with the 12 items at the 10 items or checkout less 10 or less items checkout line. They came out with that one. The girl who's even though she's the only one at the deli counter, still takes the ticket.
Still takes the ticket.
So if they're coming out with another one, we'll have to look for it. So
exactly. And last but not least, Scotty, thanks for coming in, stepping up, being my co-host today. I really appreciate it. I always say this, we need to get you on a little more. You have a lot of expertise. Obviously, you're covering a lot of spring sports as well. So we'll definitely have to have you on, but thanks for joining me today.
No problem, Joe. My pleasure. Anytime.